It is 6 o'clock, and so I will call this meeting of the Select Board to order, March 9, 2026, pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, amended on March 28, 2025. Governor Moore Healy signed into law an act extending pandemic-related authorizations related to public meetings, allowing hybrid meeting options for public bodies through June 30, 2027. This March 9, 2026 Select Board meeting will be conducted in a hybrid format via Zoom and in person. Good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, Chair of the Select Board. With me is my colleague on the board, Joe Prevotera. You are present?
Yes.
Thank you. Also with me is our Town Administrator, Connor Reed, and Deputy Town Administrator, Molly Fitzpatrick. And of course, Tish Healy, assistant to the town administrator. So welcome everyone. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will hereby grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting and thank Charlotte Lynch for being with us to do so. Is there anyone else who wishes to record the meeting? I see no affirmative responses. I also do want to welcome everyone who is joining us online. Tish, could I ask you for how many people are with us?
Currently 7.
Currently 7, and it looks like we have 3 non-employee residents with us here in person. So welcome everyone. We'll move right into the chair's updates. Most importantly, by now all residents should be aware that on February 26th, the day after our last select board meeting, the apparatus floor of our main fire station, FS1, was deemed by structural engineers to be no longer suitable to support our fire apparatus. As a result, the department's frontline operations and personnel quarters are now being housed at FS2 in Islington, and FS1 has been closed at night. The situation, which we have known for some time has been urgent, has now become emergent. I want to publicly thank our fire chief, Steve Lund, who is with us here tonight, and all the members of the department who have continued to protect our town as they always do, despite these very challenging circumstances. Tonight, we will be discussing alternative temporary operating solutions and a process toward a long-term solution. I want to reiterate that the safety of our firefighters and the reliability of our emergency response services remains our highest priorities. As part of my update tonight and going forward, I will attempt to answer any resident questions that were unable to be answered at our last meeting. First, as we said, residents wanted to know how many people are participating remotely. We provided that. At our last meeting, we received a question from Nada Milosevic Fabrizio, who also forwarded her question by letter, requesting clarification and documentation regarding the legal authority and charter compliance for the use of the titles Assistant Town Administrator and Deputy Town Administrator within the town's administrative structure. While our town administrator has already replied in writing to NADA with an explanation and supporting documentation, for the benefit of all residents, I will provide a very short summary of that explanation, which is that the Westwood Town Charter grants broad authority to the town administrator in the staffing and efficient administration of municipal operations, conveying discretion to do so in various sections of Chapter 6. And the absence of any one job title from the charter is not the same as said title being prohibited. While Westwood's Personnel Board is specifically an advisory body on matters on classification and compensation plans, it is worth noting that the Deputy Town Administrator and Finance Director positions were reviewed in 2 recent discussions and votes of the Personnel Board in 2022 and 2024. As explained by Town Administrator Reed, the existence of a deputy or assistant town administrator role is legally appropriate and operationally prudent for the efficient administration of the town of Westwood's government. We also received at last meeting comments and inquiries from Julie Bride relative to the work of the FS1 steering committee. And we were actually able to speak to Julie at our office hours this past Friday. She asked questions about evaluating the 8 potential sites originally identified for FS1 and relative to expanding the scorecard to assess impacts to the local economy, green space, and abutters. And in response, we have referred those questions to the FS1 steering committee. Lastly, we received inquiry as to whether we can provide a list of online participants to our meetings, and we will review that and report back as to whether that functionality exists. Regarding the special town meeting called with respect to the pending declaratory judgment action by the town relative to Prout Farm, the board wants to acknowledge the votes taken at that meeting and also acknowledge that there are at least hundreds of residents who would like that pending legal action to come to an end. We too would very much like to see that matter resolved now, and we will continue to make efforts toward that. In the meantime, the board is not pursuing the legal action at this time, as the action is stayed pending the court's decision on the pending cross motions for judgment on the pleadings. At the special town meeting, we provided a full accounting of legal expenses incurred to date, and we expect no additional expenditures of funds relative to this matter until there is something of substance to discuss with our attorney. We have heard from numerous residents on this issue during the special town meeting, during many of our select board meetings, by email, letter, phone calls, and conversations around town. We've heard from residents who disagree with the actions the board has taken and from others who are supportive of them. And we understand that this is an issue which a large number of residents care about deeply. As we move forward, we will continue to be as transparent as we can about this matter with residents, while also respecting our legal privileges and obligations. And that ends my chair update, and I will turn it over to our town administrator for his update.
Sure, thank you, Marianne. I'd like to echo Marianne's comments, both to the chief, all the firefighters in Westwood Fire for their kind of quick problem solving and resilience, but also to Deputy Administrator Fitzpatrick, to our planning and building staff as well. Finance has really been everyone having to get involved to try to troubleshoot really quickly under really difficult circumstances. So you all deserve a lot of credit for that, and I'm very thankful for all of your work. Marianne touched on as well, I'd like to thank the Westwood Public Library. I've been getting to use this facility quite a bit since starting. Last week on Monday, I had a meet and greet with citizens that was reasonably well attended, I thought. Folks were really thoughtful. It was nice to start getting to know some of the residents in town and start building relationships and hopefully creating what I hope throughout my tenure will be a culture of people feeling like they are welcome to come see me, talk to me, let me know what they're thinking about, and help me do my job the best I can to serve this community. Friday that week, we were back in this room. I had office hours with Marianne. Again, a handful of residents came to that. That was another, really positive event, I feel. That was really nice to get to spend some time with those folks. FS1 is a very common subject that comes up, but also just feedback on a variety of topics important to the town. And again, helping me selfishly get up to speed with the things that are important to the folks who live here. So that was great. I have a third event coming up next week with Joe at the Wentworth Hall in Islington. That's going to be Wednesday, the 18th at 4:30 to 6. But one we did last week was during business hours. So the hope here is this is a little later. So if folks couldn't make last week, they can come to that one. And this is something that I hope to make practice of moving forward, just to make opportunities for people to get to spend some time with me and spend some time with the town. So thanks to everyone involved in that. We're going to hear an update from Fire Department and Deputy Administrator Fitzpatrick on the emergency response to the closure of FS1. But I did want to acknowledge that at your last meeting, not 2 weeks ago, the board was asked and very much appreciate that you authorized the use of some of your reserve funds so that we could get to work on the preliminary site analysis at the 2 off-site locations behind Starbucks and Deerfield, in addition to the existing site that the FS1 steering committee has identified as potential sites for a new FS1 project. This week, I expect to be executing a contract with Weston and Sampson to begin that preliminary site work so that we can start getting some productive information from select board, for FS1 steering committee, and for the residents of Westwood during the months of March and April, so that we can all be as informed and comfortable as we can be for the May 4th town meeting.
Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
We will now move to public and press. And just as a reminder, we'll start with folks who are actually here in person, and then we'll move to any comments from folks who are online. For those who are here, if you would raise your hand, and when you're recognized, you may come forward, Lynn. And let me just give some other reminders before you speak, Lynn, but please have a seat. Please be reminded, we're asking folks to limit their comments to 3 minutes. If you get to the last 20-second mark, I'll give you a reminder about that. And for those who are online, please use the Q&A function. And of course, everyone needs to give their name and their full address when making comments. Welcome.
Thank you. Lynn Beatty, 37 Abbey Road. I thought I only had one question, but another one was raised just as the meeting started. It took me 25 minutes last night to find the Zoom link for this meeting. I tried again this afternoon. I am very conversant with the select board agendas, the announcement of meetings. And then once I found what I thought was right, I clicked on it, and then I had to download a PDF, and then I get the Zoom link. I think that's why there's 7 people on Zoom. I think there are people trying to get into the meeting and they can't because it is this roundabout route to get that information. I imagine that there are some security concerns as somebody who runs Zoom meetings and has been a participant in large Zoom meetings, both professional organizations and various kinds of things where you have 50 people on a Zoom, and you do not want somebody to come and disrupt that Zoom. So there's a pretty simple, straightforward way. And I don't, because I'm not a techno person, but I'm sure somebody at the Westwood Media Center can help you with this, where you can say to people ahead of time, if you want to be on this Zoom and listen or comment, you need to give us your name and your email address, and we will give you the link closer to that time. And it's all in just one note via Zoom goes out to everybody who registered, and they get that link, and that protects disruption. But to make somebody have to spend that much time to find that link, it's just not, it doesn't make sense. I mean, no wonder there's only 7 people on Zoom. That's my feeling. But the other thing that came up when you were sort of giving an update post this special town meeting and the lawsuit, you said that it was stayed. By that, do you mean there's been no action since January 23rd? We're waiting on Judge Connolly to rule on the motion to amend the answer by the land trust and the motion and the opposition part of the town to that amendment of the answer. And it's not formally a stay, it's just waiting. Is it? I need a clarification because I just looked at the docket and I saw no stay.
There's a stipulation as to a stay so that the parties are not.
Oh, you mean the one from December 3rd?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That clarifies. Thank you.
I appreciate what you said, Lynn, about the time it took you to find the link. That's not acceptable. Usually it's in the calendar.
Yes.
And that wasn't
I
working.
couldn't find it.
We're going to look into this.
It would be helpful if
And
it were
we will
easy for people to
report
find.
back. That's
Otherwise, you're defeating the whole purpose of that.
agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mary,
Yes.
I just logged in,
Okay.
so something changed from Glenn certainly knows how to do his own links. So there must have been something wrong sent to them. It's working now, and so something must have been, that's this afternoon.
It must have been late. That's what I'm thinking.
Anyone else here? No? Do we have any questions in the Q&A, Tish?
You have one. There's one question from William Sellis, 175 Canton Street. How many people are now attending remotely? So we have 11 attendees.
11 attendees, Bill.
And I have one resident who has her hand raised, which is Kathy Wallace.
Okay. We will recognize Kathy. Kathy, please give us your name and address when you come in.
Hi, good evening. Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. I wanted to thank Town Administrator Connor Reed and the Select Board for providing the opportunity to attend the office hours on Friday, March 6th. It's a new experience that I haven't had in my tenure here in Westwood. And I want to share that with other residents to say, take advantage of this. We have a terrific new leader in our town. I was very impressed by Connor Reed's leadership skills and how approachable he was and what great listening that he did. It's informal. It's not intimidating. It's an open discussion where you talk about whatever you want. I am really looking forward to watching Connor help us get through the challenges facing our town in a cohesive way. So thank you very much to all of you. And just as a reminder, I know Connor mentioned it, but the next one is Wednesday, March 18th, 4:30 to 6 at Wentworth Hall. And please take advantage of these opportunities to participate in town government because by doing that, it will make everything better. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other comments in the queue, Tish?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we will move on to our scheduled action for the evening, beginning with a report on FS1, the Apparatus Bay deficiency, the station closure.
Let me see if I can close that.
Thank you. Sorry, it's wonderful to have the sun, but it is directly in my eye. We will welcome Chief Blunt and Deputy Town Administrator Molly Fitzpatrick. Thank you both for being here.
So as you had sort of teed up for us, we just want to give a brief update on what the last 10 days have been like, how operations have shifted, and most importantly, how we proceed moving forward over the next few weeks. Here we go.
You got it? Here you go.
Oh, a little delay. There we go. So on February 26th, Thursday, I received a call from Assistant Chief McCarthy, who was concerned about the hole you see there on the top picture. That hole has been there for a while, but it had grown and some additional pieces had begun loosening up. And out of an abundance of caution, he moved all of the apparatus off of the Apparatus Bay floor. When I arrived, we took a look at it and decided that an emergency structural evaluation was necessary. The engineer came out later that day, and based on his findings, he determined that none of the bays can hold the ladder trucks or the engines. They're just too large. And the two bays in the middle, bays 2 and 3, cannot hold any equipment. And so that put us in a place where we're going to have to make pretty serious operational changes. So at that time, Chief Blunt, Assistant Chief McCarthy, myself, and a number of firefighters sat together to try to figure out this in an emergency situation, where are we going to put all of our apparatus? Trucks have to be housed inside due to the weather, and ambulances as well because of the medication that they carry. So we talked about a lot of different options, a lot of different places we could do. And at the end of that conversation was the consensus that we needed to move all staffed apparatus and personnel to Station 2 and only allowing FS1 to be used during the day when it was over a certain degree where the apparatus could stay on the front apron. The chief reached out to all of the chiefs in the neighboring area and set up automatic mutual aid so that it would ensure the fastest response time possible based on when the call came in. We knew we were going to have to do something, so the finance department sought and received within 24 hours an emergency procurement waiver from the Commonwealth, which will allow us to sidestep some procurement in order to make this happen really quickly. And we began the two parallel tracks of researching what would it cost to fix the apparatus bay to make it so the trucks could fit in it again, while also looking at different options for temporary solutions. Do you want to talk about how operations changed?
Yeah, so we moved everybody to station 2, on shifts with 11. That's pretty tight over there. It's built for 5. We're running ladder 2 now. Ladder 1 is actually housed in Medfield. We didn't have a spot for it. Couldn't leave it outside. So we're only running the 1 ladder. We have the squad and the hazmat truck and engine 1 are downstairs at station 1. We had talked about using engine 1 frontline because it fits down, but it's so unreliable and so unsafe. That's why we've purchased a new one. We're just waiting for it. We won't get that till January of 27. That one would have fit down there, but it doesn't work. So for now, we're running 2 engines in the ladder and 2 ambulances out of station 2. It has increased the response time to this side of town dramatically. We don't have a huge sample size, but I was doing some apples to apples comparisons. Like to Highland Glen, it went from like 3 to 4 minute response to 8 to 9 minute response, and well over the guidelines for a safe response.
So the decisions that were made on February 26th were the emergency decisions. It was how do we keep our people and our equipment safe? And so now we're moving into the short, long-term solution. And so in doing that, we've been keeping in mind, priorities of firefighter safety, the equipment and vehicle location and its response readiness, which then leads into time to deploy. And all of those things are there to restore the department's response on the fire station 1 side of town, improving response times, increasing public safety. While we're considering those very important things, we also need to consider the cost of doing so and the availability of funds in order to move this as quickly as possible. We have 2 options to talk about today. This is very small font, and I'm sorry, Linka. The first is emergency repairs to FS1. So the engineering firm that we had come out to look at this told us that in order to make the building safe for the trucks to come back in, we would need to tear off the epoxy floor, fix the cracks that were underneath it, put the epoxy back down, and then on the lower level, replace and add shoring to the basement, which we would lose
3 days.
almost all of the bays that are down there. So we would lose storage space for vehicles, obviously the vehicle stored down there, and any space for the mechanic to work. Just that base work costs, estimates say, is about $350,000. And there were a lot of caveats in that because when we take off the epoxy floor, we don't know how bad the cracks are. It's impossible to see. There's some, like the picture we saw, where we can see that there's a hole, but there are likely cracks that we don't see. And so in creating a cost estimate, a reasonable addition there for the things that we cannot see is an additional $200,000. So if we have that base 350 plus the 200,000, we're at an estimate about 550. We need to add into their project management and a healthy contingency in a project like this. So a reasonable recommended budget for restoring the floor would be about $750,000. Option 2 is a temporary sprung structure that will be placed on the front apron of FS1. Last week, members of the department, members of Community Economic Development, Building, Finance met with a number of different vendors to look at what kind of structures are out there, what kind of structures are available, what site work would need to be done, what utility hookups would look like, because this structure would ultimately need to be heated, obviously for the water and medication, secure plumbing, electricity, and different things like that. And I just want to call out specifically at the bottom there that the Westwood zoning bylaw specifies that a temporary structure can be in place for a maximum of 3 years. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're talking about a temporary structure. So the goal of this option would be to restore fire department operations to this side of town quicker than a full repair and for a lower immediate cost. And so depending on what the final pricing equals, we may have enough money in available FY26 funds in order to start this process now and not have to wait for town meeting. Other points with the temp structure is that it could be moved at some point. And so if a new station were to be built at Station 1, this temporary structure could be moved. It could also be used for a different purpose in town after it's served its life here. The ultimate goal, I think, of stabilizing operations while the long-term decision of where and when to build FS1 is advanced. The cost estimates here, it's about $280,000 for the cost of the structure and the install of the structure. The doors have to be procured separately because they're special doors. Those would be about $30,000, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, all those utility work and contingency. So the recommended planning number for this option would be about $400,000. I think it's important to note that both of these options restore response on the side of town, which is the benefit. They do not, however, improve conditions for the firefighters who work out of that building or meet the programmatic needs. It's an emergency Band-Aid on top of an emergency Band-Aid and not a permanent solution. When we're talking about this, considering the investment of $750,000 into emergency repairs at FS1 that we know is beyond its useful life and we know is coming down, and knowing that unknowns could still drive that number up further. And I had mentioned about the future needs, temporary structure can serve as interim operation if it's needed. It's a bridge strategy while we're making other decisions, and it aligns with the ongoing FS1 steering committee site feasibility work. So tonight we're here to recommend that we proceed with the installation of a temporary sprung structure. It's big. That big white block, it almost looks like it's the size of the station. It would be a 3-bay flush up against the station, releasing out onto High Street. It's about 5 feet from the side, 3 or 4 feet from the sidewalk. So the sidewalk would remain clear and it would allow us to put the necessary apparatus back at Station 1. The next steps is for select board consideration. I'm going to ask Connor to take this one.
Sure, thanks, Molly. So in looking at these options, I think it's pretty clear looking at it, but just to be matter of fact, we're picking among a menu of bad choices and trying to pick which one is the least bad. And none of these are going to be things that lead to a return on public funds in a way that people 10 years from now say, oh, that was a good capital project. So keeping in mind that this is an emergency, and the most important part of this is getting a response back on this side of town as quickly as we can. As Molly has already said, we collectively, including the fire department, recommend going the sprung structure route, working with finance department, assessing available funds within fiscal 26. We believe there's a path to do that. One is currently unallocated mitigation funds from Dana-Farber at University Station. And the remainder, we believe, could be accomplished through appropriated but unspent facilities capital that DPW maintains. So what my recommendation is, the collective recommendation is for the board to consider authorization for myself, working with the fire chief to utilize up to $200,000 of the available mitigation funds from the CSA with Dana-Farber. And again, we already have authorization on those other capital funds. This would give us the flexibility we need to get moving on this. We believe we're talking 4 to 8 weeks potentially. And that's the fast. This is the fast route with an emergency procurement waiver from DCAM, from the state, with funds available for mitigation and available capital, and it will still take weeks. Whereas if we were to go the alternative route, you'd be seeking a pretty sizable temporary or emergency repair funding at town meeting. So you're waiting until at least May 4th just to have an authorization. And then depending on how significant those repairs are once they start tearing the floor up, it's kind of an open-ended question. So brings me no pleasure in meeting number 3 to come with this request and recommendation, but I think, given the limited choices and the dire need of getting a response back on this side of town, this is the most responsible option. And we're happy to answer any further questions about it.
Thank you, Chief. Molly, Connor, I just have one question for the chief, and then I want to turn it to you, Joe.
Sure.
Chief, obviously time is of the essence here. I assume that this front structure is the option that you and the department are behind.
Absolutely. We had talked to a couple different vendors and one of them said not till June and was like, oh boy. Then this company said they could do it in the end of this month, a week or two within, depending their work schedule and stuff like that. It is absolutely our preferred option.
Thank you. Joe?
Mary Ann, I don't have any questions. I think, none of us want to put good money after bad, so I think this is right choice. Certainly be supportive of it. I want to thank you, Chief, and Molly and Connor for putting your shoulders into this, the rapid movement on this. This is top priority for our citizens, and it's a priority for us. So I'm happy to make a motion.
I'm in full agreement as well. Time is of the essence. I want to thank also the great work, the fast work that's been done since February 26th by the entire team to get to this point, get an answer this quickly to put before us. So thank you for that. All right, Joe. Oh, any questions from the public? Yes, sir. You just need to give your name and your address. Hopefully the microphone can, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the table, just so the microphone can hear you, sir.
Stephen Hart, 174 Plum Plain Road. You mentioned that the structure can be moved. So I know that at one point there was authorization for putting a temporary structure where the Legion is. So is there an approximate cost for what it would cost to move the structure?
I don't have that in front of me. I'm fine.
Thank you for the question.
All right, I'm ready. I'd like to make a motion, the select board authorize the town administrator to utilize up to $200,000 of available mitigation funds from the Community Services Agreement, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, for the purpose of obtaining, installing, as well as securing any necessary permits for the installation of a structure that meets the fire chief's requirements to house needed fire apparatus on a temporary basis.
I will second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is a unanimous vote in favor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief.
Appreciate it.
Here, because we're here in person.
In person.
Okay, well, thank you very much and very glad to get that very important piece of business done tonight. And that will move us to the FY27 budget update with our Finance Director, Stephanie McManus. Welcome.
I know. Right. Hi, everyone. So tonight, as Marian said, I'm here to walk through a brief update on the FY27 budget. The updates are relatively minor, primarily reflect final numbers that have come in since the last time I presented to you in February, including health insurance rates and a few outside assessments. I'll then also review some financial articles related to the FY26 current year closeout, as well as a few changes to the FY27 capital plan. These numbers will continue to be refined before your next meeting on March 23rd, when the board will be asked to vote financial articles.
Sometimes it's has a little delay.
Try again.
There you go.
Okay, so the first updates are related to outside assessments. These are costs set by external groups that we incorporate into the town budget once the final numbers are received. Blue Hills Regional School is the first one. The FY 27 assessment is just over $100,000, which actually represents a small decrease of about $1,400 compared to the previous fiscal year. Enrollment remains unchanged at 4 students. So there's 4 students enrolled this year, and 4 students will be enrolled next year. So there is no impact to the overall budget for that piece. The MWRA sewer assessment. So the MWRA sets annual assessments to communities by calculating the total revenue required for their operations and capital projects. And then they allocate those costs based on a number of different usage metrics. For example, like sewer flow percentage is one of the factors. So the updated assessment for this year is $3.05 million, which is about $33,000 lower than our FY 26 budget and lower than our original estimated assumption for this year. So this will be reflected in the sewer enterprise fund budget on the expense side, as well as the sewer revenue budget side. So it has no impact on the overall operating budget. So all good updates so far, no changes.
And healthcare.
Yes. We also recently received the final health insurance rates from the GIC following their meeting on March 5th. That's a little bit later than they usually vote. And the updated health insurance budget number is $9.97 million. So compared to the most recent estimate, which I had come to last month with an estimate of about 8.5% for an increase, this represents a small increase over that of about $7,600. So very close to what we had already been projecting, which is a good thing. So overall, the health insurance budget reflects an 8.6% increase over FY 26. The average GIC rate increase this year was 7.5%. And that all varies. I have some numbers up here depending on different plans, whether it's active employees or retirees. And that's how we set our budget based on who's enrolled and these percentage increases. So the impact of these final rates has already been incorporated into the fixed cost budget. The slight increase will be offset by a reduction to the Medicare payroll tax line, which is also within fixed costs. So there's no net impact to the overall budget. This is just a quick update, nothing much, just to show you how all of those changes have been incorporated into what we call Article 3 or the main operating budget. So that's still a 4.3% increase over FY 26. And as you can see, just a breakdown of the 5 different major categories: municipal, schools, fixed cost, debt, and sewer, and what those percentages are. Not much of a change since your last meeting. Just incorporating in those assessments, the health insurance numbers. And then one different piece is that the local receipts have increased about $402,000, bringing the projected FY 27 total to $5.5 million. And this article will be finalized. It shouldn't change much, but will be finalized and ready for a vote on the 23rd. These are the more significant changes and updates for the night. Article 1, and the next few articles, actually, the few slides are articles needed to close out what we call the current fiscal year, FY 26. And this one in particular addresses the budget adjustments for FY 26 through transfers between accounts. So in this case, the transfer amount is $405,000 from the FinCom Reserve Fund to the Snow and Ice account. This is the entirety of the FinCom Reserve Fund. This is due to the winter season being more active than originally budgeted. So the total budget for snow and ice each year is $450,000. It is common for us to go over that each year. This one is just a little bit higher than the last couple of years have been. We've had 22 snow events so far this year, including 4 that require contractor support, which is a significant amount. So snow and ice budgets are always difficult to predict, but with the year-end transfers are typical depending on how the winter season actually unfolds. So this article allows us to move funding from within the operating budget because to cover those expenses, because the FinCom reserve is in there funded with free cash. So this will just move to the snow and ice expense budget. And the total amount in the FinCom reserve does not actually cover what is needed to close out this year. So there is additional funding request in Article 2. So Article 2 is very similar. It's FY 26 budget adjustments that require additional appropriations, but these come from available funds, such as here in particular, it's free cash and ambulance receipts. So the total proposed adjustments equal 1.5 million. And the largest drivers are personnel costs related to contractual wage increases, long-term leave coverage, and public safety staffing needs. And I'll go through each one in particular. There are some notes up there, but give more details. Specifically for the police department is requesting a transfer of $210,000 to address projected FY26 overtime shortfall. So just a number of items that play into that. First, contractual wage increases for FY26, raised overtime rates. However, the overtime line item itself was not increased in FY26 proportionally. As a result, every hour of overtime now costs more than anticipated when the budget was built. Quick note for FY27, we do have recommended in there an increase of $50,000 to the police department overtime budget to try to keep up with that problem in future years. Second, the department adjusted minimum manning on the overnight shift from 3 officers to 4. So similar to fire, all shifts have assigned numbers. In this case, there are making sure. Okay. All shifts have 6 assigned, but the minimum staffing level matters obviously when someone is out. So for safety reasons, the overnight minimum was increased to ensure consistent 4-officer coverage. And then third, the overtime account must absorb normal contractually obligated absences, including vacation, sick leave, which is a big one, training, injury leave, another one, military leave, and parental leave. So these are routine operational realities of running a 24-hour public safety department. The next item, the fire department is requesting a transfer of $570,000 to address a projected FY26 overtime shortfall as well. This reflects, in particular for their department, for the entirety of FY26, the department had 2 firefighter positions out on injury leave. And then in addition, there have been 4 other injury leaves during the year, ranging from several weeks to the most of them were several months. So in this staffing model, when a firefighter's out, the minimum of 9, which we've talked about before for staffing minimums, must still be maintained. So that means the absence is also backfilled on overtime. There are also additional costs related to snow and ice operations. Again, it's been a heavy year for snow events, and the higher costs associated with needing to rely on both DPW staff using their overtime, as well as outsider contractor support. So, and I will note, since these numbers were drafted, I want to be able to look at what they are right there to make sure. It was $180,000, and then, thank you, Molly, 350. Since these numbers were drafted, there were 2 more ice events last week. If anyone saw that overnight, we were required to salt, which included the price of buying additional salt and then DPW staff time to overnight salt the roads. So these costs will need to be calculated and added to these numbers, which will be at your next meeting on the 23rd. It shouldn't be too much more than this. I just wanted to point that out. And then finally, there are expenses related to ambulance services, specifically to supplement the ambulance equipment line item in the fire department. Each year, there's an ambulance amount in their base budget in the operating for expenses. And then at the end of the year, we supplement the ambulance item for actual activity. And then there's also an amount to supplement the ambulance billing costs that are within the collector's office. We've collected more this year in ambulance receipts than previous years, partly because of rate adjustments to those ambulance rates, and then also the billing company that we hired last year, thanks to the chief, is doing a much better job on collection. So those costs during the collector's office are fees depending on how much we bring the receipts. So as the receipts go up, cost to that goes up as well. And these are all typical year-end adjustments to ensure accounts are properly funded through the close of the fiscal year. I've been just taking questions on that one, maybe just because it's a lot of information that.
For board's benefit, or anyone watching at home, the overtime transfers, you notice a theme with both police and fire, that injuries on duty are something that contribute pretty heavily to those needs. You obviously can't plan for or budget for that. And so we'll be talking about later tonight a proposal that is for, I believe, Select Board Article 6 to accept a provision of the injured on duty state law to allow the town to create an injured on duty reserve fund that towns can use for those direct costs and the incidental overtime that gets triggered by those injuries. Because those can be very hard to predict, very hard to budget, by no fault of the chiefs. And that will provide a mechanism for the town to responsibly have a off-ramp there in the future to assist and hopefully bring down the Article 2 asks.
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I also forgot to mention, on the police side, we had added $50,000 in FY 27 to the overtime. On the fire, we're adding 75,000. So trying again through accounts like that, as well as building slowly the operating budget, so that we don't always have to have an Article 2 transfer this large. Okay. Budget Article 14. This is a new one for this evening that you'll be asked to vote on later, but I'm just presenting right now so that you know what it is. It represents FY 26 budget adjustments, so similar to what I was just going through with Article 2, but specifically for the school department. The specific amounts are still being finalized, so those numbers will be updated before your March 23rd meeting from the schools. This allows for adjustments to ensure all accounts are adequately funded, again, through FY 26. And this would just be adding this as an article as a placeholder until those numbers and information comes in. Article 4, municipal capital. I know we haven't gone through capital in a couple of weeks, but there hasn't been anything added to this, just 2 minor adjustments. The Finance and Warrant Commission at their meeting in February, which was great, pointed out to me that the 10-wheel dump truck on here is significantly different cost than another dump truck that's listed. So I just adjusted the title to be more specific on what that is. And then the last item on here is an increase to the facilities maintenance line item, building facilities maintenance line item. As Molly and Connor just presented, some of these funds will need to be used for the FS1 Sprung structure. So while we can, we're going to replenish that account for FY 27. So that original amount in that line item was $150,000. We're now increasing that request to $275,000. So the total article comes to just over 1.8 million now, and still funded with free cash. Article 7 includes additional capital projects funded with free cash. The new total proposed funding for this is just over $2.4 million. The key change here is an addition of an item, PFAS environmental testing at 637 High Street. Do you want to talk about this now?
Just to point out that we had done environmental study back in January or April of 2025, which identified PFAS at 637 High Street. We've gone through 2 levels of testing so far, doing drilling in and around the area, and have been communicating with Mass DEP about it. Before Mass DEP will give us any sort of substantial conversation about what remediation is going to look like, we have to be able to map the entirety of what they call the plume, which is how far it goes. And based on our last level of testing, we still haven't fully captured what that plume is. And so this amount is to hopefully finalize all of the testing, so then we can work with Mass DEP and come up with a solution of how to move forward. And so just as a note for the general public that this is state required at this point, it is irrelevant what happens at 637 High Street. This will need to be addressed separate and apart from this one.
So this slide just shows, this is more of just an FYI slide, available balances and proposed use of several non-tax revenue sources that support the budget. It's tiny, I apologize. The Finance and Warrant Commission had asked for this, so I thought I would just throw it on there and present to you as well, so you have these numbers. If all articles are approved at town meeting, going into the fiscal year, the remaining balances, I use that term loosely because obviously meals and hotel tax revenue is continuing to come in quarterly between now and then. Ambulance receipts come in on a monthly basis. So these balances will fluctuate, but minimum just to show that there is available funding and all of these funding sources for all the articles we're requesting. Free cash would have a projected remaining balance of 7.4 million. That's with an assumption that we are using about 8.2 million for the FY 27 budget. Now, that does not include amounts just yet for Article 11, which is the Special Ed Reserve Fund allocation for the school department, or Article 14, which is the FY 26 transfers for the school department. So once those numbers are in, that free cash number most likely will go up. But for now, those are the amounts. Meals and hotel tax, we're estimating using just under 1.2 million. So that would have a remaining balance of about 1.46 million. And then ambulance receipts, we're requesting to use just about 1.5 million with a remaining projected balance of 650,000.
Stephanie, on that, I know we certify, our free cash gets certified once a year by the state.
Yes.
But with respect to meals and hotels and ambulance receipts, looking at the current balance as of 2/1, when we think about town meeting, will that number be updated by then? How often are you actually updating those numbers?
So the next time they would be updated for the public would be when we do the warrant book that gets sent out to all households. So probably late April, so that number will be updated
As of
right before town meeting. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
And these funds allow the town to support capital projects and other needs without increasing the tax levy. So just looking ahead, there's some upcoming steps in the budget process. On March 23rd, the select board will be asked to review all the final updates. Shouldn't be too much between now and then, but I'll go through a list 1 through 14 of everything we have and vote on those articles for FY 27. After that, the financial articles will be submitted to the Finance and Warrant Commission. And we usually do that with a detailed memo outlining any last minute changes. And then the Finance and Warrant Commission hearing is scheduled for March 25th. Well, they will review and vote the final articles before town meeting. And tomorrow night, we are all going in front of the Finance and Warrant Commission to do a presentation on my end. It'll be very similar to what we've done tonight. And we've also provided them with a memo. They've submitted some questions and we answered those in writing and submitted a memo to them and shared that tonight with the board as well. So you'll have that. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Great job, and you'll be ready to do it all again tomorrow night across the hall. Joe, any questions?
Well done. Thank you.
We will look forward to hearing you tomorrow and then at our next meeting.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will move on now on our scheduled action, talking about a one-day special wine and malt license for Boston Marathon fundraiser, 711 Clapboardtree Street. We have our Community and Economic Director, Nora Loughnane, and the applicants, Mr. Malloy, Brenda Malloy. Please, welcome.
So I will start this off and then turn to Brendan to fill in some more details of the application. So this would be for the Bean Farm, would be the location at 711 Clapboardtree Street. And it's scheduled for Sunday, March 19th. The event is, I'm sorry, March 29th. I'm writing wrong. Sorry about that. The event is termed a Boston Marathon Meadow Muffin event. It's pretty interesting, and Brenda can explain the details of how that will be laid out. The event will be from 1 to 4 p.m. With setup between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. They're anticipating approximately 150 members or attendees to come to the event, and they've secured permission from the adjacent property owner, LifeWorks, to park cars on that facility. So people will be able to park at LifeWorks and walk to the Bean Farm to attend the event. So this was reviewed by the Alcohol Review Committee. And the committee understood that there would also be a food permit issued along with this. And the food vendor has applied for its health department license or permit for the event, and that's pending. So the Alcohol Review Committee recommended unanimously that the board consider granting this license, but they had a condition that they'd like the board to take into account, and it's based on the attendees. The Alcohol Review Committee does not believe that with 150 attendees, any police detail would be needed, but there is concern that the attendance could fluctuate and it could end up being even more popular than that. And at the last minute, there could be a need for consideration of a police detail. So we ask you to take that into consideration as well.
Mr. Malloy, anything you'd like to add?
Oh, no, just that pretty much covers it, but yeah, I think it'll be a fun event and just requesting permission for the 1-day license. Have about 90 squares sold for this event so far, so I think it should be a good event to raise money for the Ed Walsh Foundation.
That's wonderful. And as I understand it, in 2014, Lieutenant Walsh lost his life in the line of duty fighting a 9-alarm fire in Boston. And this foundation is in his name. Well, thank you very much for your charitable works, for bringing this to us. Thank you, Nora. Joe, any questions?
None.
I think the consideration that's being requested by the Alcohol Review Committee is a reasonable one. I will entertain a motion, Joe.
Happy to. I'd like to make a motion, select board grant approval to Brendan Malloy for the fundraiser to benefit Lieutenant Ed Walsh Engine 33 Foundation for the 1-day special wine and malt license to serve alcohol on Sunday, March 29, 2026 at 711 Left Tree Street from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. and the time to set up and remove alcohol from the premises from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday, March 29, 2026, pending food permit issuance, final public safety inspections. Approval to be granted with the following conditions. The applicant must contact the licensing agent on Wednesday, March 25th with the ticket sales update. Should the event ticket sales exceed 150 tickets, a police detail will be required for the entirety of the event. If at any time after March 25th and before the day of the event on March 29th, ticket sales exceed 150 tickets, and I hope you do, the applicant must contact Westwood Police Department directly and arrange for a police detail. I'd also like the minutes to reflect the fact that firefighter Mike Kennedy, who died alongside Ed, Mike's mother turned this terrible, terrible tragedy into a very positive force by establishing a foundation in cooperation with the Boston Fire Department that later developed heat resistance fire hose and has been adopted throughout the country.
I will second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Best of luck with your
Thank you.
event. Thank you, Nora. If you're staying there, Nora, for the
One
next
more.
item. We are now going to open a public hearing, excuse me, to review and adopt amendments to the rules and regulations governing alcoholic beverages, special and 1-day liquor license rules and regulations, and licensing fees. Before we begin, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to open the March 9th, 2026 public hearing to review and adopt the amendments to the rules and regulations governing alcohol beverages, special and 1-day liquor license rules and regulations, and licensing fees.
I will second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous vote in favor. Our hearing is now open and the floor is yours, Nora. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a request for you to update your rules and regulations. It comes about because of a town meeting article from 2025 in which voters requested a home rule petition to allow for Section 15 licenses to be issued by this town for all alcohol sales in food stores of 20,000 square feet or larger. So we were successful in having that home rule petition approved and signed by the governor. And Westwood now has the ability to issue up to 4 licenses for businesses that meet those concerns. Right now, there are 2 businesses in Westwood that would meet the terms. One is Wegmans, who has requested this type of license. And if the board does amend its rules and regulations, we'll be coming back to you with a request, an application for a license. Roach Brothers is also eligible. They meet the criteria. We have not heard from them if they're interested, but if they are, they would also be eligible to apply for a license. So the regulation updates have been prepared by Karen Flynn, our licensing agent, and they've been reviewed by the Alcohol Review Committee. There are several changes. Most of the changes are to the Article 15 section, principally to update to allow all alcohol. Presently, we only allow wine and malt beverage to be sold for off-premise consumption. So we have, I believe, 5 establishments in Westwood that have wine and malt beverages. Those that are larger than 20,000 square feet, which are the 2 that I mentioned, could surrender those licenses in exchange for an all alcohol if they chose to do so. So the regulations update that. While we're at it, we took some other, took the opportunity to make some other changes. For instance, the document still refers to the Board of Selectmen in several places throughout. We're asking you to update that to change it to Select Board. We're also asking for changes where the section 15 document refers to wine and malt beverages, to change that to alcohol beverages, so that covers both wine and malt beverage as well as all alcohol licenses. We're asking you to update the regulations to require all submittals to be electronic rather than paper. Something else that has changed since the last time the regulations were updated in 2018. We're asking for the policy statement to add all alcohol license number and town meeting vote. Also in definitions, we're adding new definitions for off-premises all alcohol beverages licenses, mixed drinks, and sealed containers. In section 2, part 14F, we're adding the annual fee for this new off-premises all alcohol beverage license, which would be $5,000. That's the same fee we charge for all alcohol on-site consumption under section 12 licenses now. In section 4, we're asking you to add a part 6D that says that any and all sales of liquor in a container of that we will prohibit sales in a container of less than 375 milliliters, which is a pint. This is to prohibit the sale of nips. And each of those regulations have been reviewed by the Alcohol Review Committee. Then we also looked at changes while we were coming before you for regulations to the special one-day liquor license rules and regulations. So the regulations under which you just issued a one-day license. Similar changes, update the Board of Selectmen to Select Board and make changes to require electronic submissions rather than paper submissions. And also add a section that the applicant must have an approved food vendor with a temporary food permit in order to obtain a one-day license. That was not originally in that section. I will point out that the red line that you received in the packet, there were, I think, 6 instances where Board of Selectmen had not replied and changed to Select Board. So I have paper copies if you're interested in seeing it. That now has a blue line on top of the red line to make sure you know exactly where the changes are. The Alcohol
We don't need that paper, Nora, but thank you.
Alcohol Review Committee reviewed it and unanimously recommends to adopt these new regulations so that issue new licenses in there.
Thank you very much, Nora. I will say, I think it's a great addition to require the food for the one-day license. That was
And
that's a great addition.
it has been done in practice for all one-day licenses, but this formalizes it by putting in the regulations.
That's a great idea. Mr. Ahern, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. If you recall last year at town meeting, there was a substantive discussion about what we were going to allow to sell if we went to all alcohol. And at the time, there was sentiment in the hall that they didn't want to allow sale of small containers of alcohol, specifically what referred to as nips. I, at the time, encouraged them to let us do that under our own regulation rather than to try and push that through the state. Town meeting graciously agreed, and we're there now. So we're not going to, these regulations don't allow us to sell, doesn't allow any vendor to sell anything less than a pint of liquor. Part of the argument is that you see those bottles littered all over the place. We're not going to contribute to that. We probably can't reduce it until we get our neighboring communities to follow suit with us, but the trip of 1,000 miles starts with one step, so that's where we're at.
Thanks for that further context, Pat. Thank you again, Nora. Joe, any questions?
No, well thought out, well done.
We will now open this public hearing up for public comment. We will check to see if we have any comment online. Our remote participants.
right now.
I think we'll just give it another moment. If people here want to stretch, feel free to do so anytime, really. Just give it another moment. But I think this, while we're waiting, I think this is great work and appreciate everybody who worked on this. It took a long time to get to this point, and it's very thoughtful work. So thank you, Nora, to you and your team. I'm not seeing any public comments, so I
I'm
think
ready.
I will entertain a motion, Joe.
I'd be happy to do so. I make the motion, select board adopt the suggested 2026 amendments to the rules and regulations governing alcoholic beverages, special and one-day liquor license, rules and regulations, and licensing fees.
Second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
I
That's a unanimous vote in favor. And now I will accept a motion to close this public hearing.
like to make a motion to close the March 9, 2026 public hearing to review and adopt amendments to the rules and regulations governing alcoholic beverages, special and one-day liquor license rules and regulations, and licensing fees.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That is a unanimous vote in favor. Nora, thank you very much again. All right, we will now move on to the FS1 update with Ford Spalding, the chair of the FS1 steering committee. Welcome.
Excuse my bad.
Welcome, Ford.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Glad to have you here.
I am Ford Spalding, Chair of the FS1 Steering Committee, and live at 10 Longwood Drive. I wasn't going to say this, but I want to. We had our 13th meeting today, so we're just moving along as we go. I just want to go a little bit of history and then where we're going. First, we really educated ourselves to understand the operations of the fire department and the programmatic required functions of the department, including equipment, tools, gear, training, etc. We also looked at the best practices through the NFPA and what they do, and there's a document on the website that has all that information on it. I've said this before, and I think it's very important. When we finally get to the stage where we're designing a station, that's the foundation of what we're doing. We're going to try, and I really think we must include all the programmatic needs for the chief and the men and the women of the department. We then have examined FS1 site opportunities that may be available within the response times of the radius for FS1. We did that, and on our website, when we presented it to you last meeting, I think you accepted it. 3 sites that we think potentially can meet the programmatic needs of the department. And I believe most favorably will be an opportunity to be financially viable to the taxpayers. I didn't say less expensive, I just said financially viable to the taxpayers. And in fact, really, those are only options. We had a discussion today. Some people think we ought to expand those options and look at it. I've asked the committee to review that and get back to me if we need a special meeting to do that. At any rate, we're going to have an FAQ and we're going to be reviewing all the other sites that we consider. We may not be pinpointing exactly where they are because they involve private property and private other locations. And, I think it's fair to them that we don't necessarily divulge all of them. But these sites are the only town-owned sites we can use, so we're not having to acquire additional land to do that. Now, our job is to really educate and communicate with our Westwood citizens to encourage them to attend and vote in the May 4th town meeting. That's really where our focus is going to be. And given the current circumstances for FS1, in fact, our entire department, which Molly presented to you earlier, we now feel we also must not only educate, but we need to advocate. And typically, I don't like to do that. I think education does it. But because of where we are, because of the severity of the situation we are, I think people need to understand how important it is to get to yes for FS1. So we're going to advocate as we go through this. And what we current plans for FS1, Molly said this, do not meet the programmatic needs, all the programmatic needs. And that's just not fair, in my opinion, for the fire department and the personnel that are there. They're very brave. They go out and they take care of all of us on a regular basis. We need to do the same for them. The FS1 steering committee are developing an active communication plan, in part to include press and social media releases. We worked on one actually today, which will be finalized, I believe, at the end of this week. A dedicated FS1 site that'd be different than the site we have now. We'll refer to that, but we want one that's very clear and very simple for people to refer to. We have an offer out, and we will continue to make it, to meet with citizens where they are. Not necessarily always to come to us. We'll go to where they are, but they need to open up their doors for us to come and do that. So that is extremely important. We will do community forums also. Well, I did mention earlier, we're doing an FAQ, which will answer a lot of questions, and we'll have that, and that'll be available on our website. And we can also disseminate it through written copy. Emails that typically have come through FS1 email site come to me and I answer them. We want to enhance that. They'll still come in and they'll come into that site. We will answer them as quickly as possible, but then they'll go on the FS1 website so everybody can see the question and the answer. And I think that would be very helpful for everyone. And we're going to do much more. We're going to do as much as we can. And I just want to reiterate, we must get to yes for FS1 this time. We really have no choice, in my opinion, to do that. So we're going to have to work on a plan, a building plan that's going to work for everyone. And we need to come together as a community.
Thank you so much, Ford. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you to every member of the steering committee who have worked very hard over these last few months. I love the attention that you're giving to the communication plan to make sure that residents are really made aware of where we are each step of the way and doing it in a very affirmative way so we can meet people where they are. So I love the creativity around that. I think if we've learned anything over this last year, it's that we need to be really making those affirmative efforts to get the information to residents. So thank you very much. Joe, anything you want to add?
I can't add to that. Other than the fact that I've been watching the meetings for it, I think you're doing a great job. I think the committee's doing a great job, and we owe you a great deal. So thank you very much.
We just need the community and us all to get together and really take a look at this in a very fair way. And that's not necessarily easy. We just have to do it.
And things have changed since you were last here at our last meeting.
Things have changed.
Times of the essence.
It's a very serious situation that we need to take care of.
Great.
Thank you, Malt.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, that brings us to old business. And the first agenda item under old business is the public comment policy. I will turn this over to Connor.
Sure. Thank you, Marianne. So for the board's benefit or anyone following along in the meeting or at home, at the board's last meeting, we had brought forward a draft public comment policy from the select board. It's my understanding in Westwood, it has been custom that the public comment practice is just at the discretion of the chair. That mirrors state law, but that there hasn't been kind of a formal set of standards that is consistent across different chairs through the years. And so appreciating that folks want to be able to start engaging more, coming to meetings in person, doing things online, hybrid, wanted to put a document together that lays out that framework on setting reasonable expectations for folks to participate in their own government. So some may feel that the multi-page policy is not the embodiment of welcoming. The rationale there is that in recent years, there's been some pretty significant shifts in case law. If you look at the Barron decision from the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, that really fundamentally altered the landscape of engagement for public boards during public comment periods. And so that puts a higher premium on boards having very clear, defined policies, both for their own conduct, but for residents, so that everyone feels that this is a fair and open process. And so hearing the feedback from Joe and Marianne from the last meeting, worked with town council to make a few modest edits. I believe really the hallmarks of the policy are similar to what you saw tonight, where there will be posted public comment at the beginning of every meeting. The purpose of this is not to stifle the ability of the chair to answer a follow-up question or answer something later in the business meeting, but so that residents who are all busier than ever, working 1-2 jobs, tending to their families, volunteering, whatever they're doing, can look at an agenda for a meeting that starts at 6. And if you have public comment posted at the beginning, reasonably deduce, if I have something that I'd like to share and I'm there around 6, I probably can do so, rather than not having a posted dedicated comment period where if there's an item on the agenda that's on the second or third page of the agenda, you may be waiting for hours. So this doesn't prohibit the latter. Again, with feedback from the board, we made it broader so that if a meeting is proceeding on time, things are moving smoothly, the chair can entertain follow-up questions later in the evening following business items as new information is shared. But really the goal here is to have kind of a more welcoming environment where folks feel like they can speak with the board. One of the tenets of a policy is that as a general rule, if the board or staff have answers to the question, we will answer you. If we don't, if it's not under our jurisdiction, we'll try to find out whose it is, right? If you come to the select board and ask them something about federal farm policy, we're gonna try to find someone for you to speak to that knows the answer to that, because we don't, or Joe might, Marianne might, but I don't. If it's a question that lies with the planning and zoning board, we'll make sure we connect you with that appropriate contact there so that folks feel like they can get to where they need to be. But if it's a question about, hey, what was it on the budget that you just presented? The plan would just be to answer you. So for those items that do fall under the select board and town administration's jurisdiction that we don't have an answer to off the top of our heads, because we don't know everything in real time, we'll follow up at the beginning of the next meeting as the chair did tonight. So I don't know if there's any final questions from the board on it. There's hard copies in the hallway if anyone's curious. I believe a draft of this is on the website as well. But again, this is really, I think, just reflective of the board's desire to have a more open process for folks.
Thank you, Connor. Joe, any?
I think your update, you captured my concerns perfectly.
That's what I like to hear.
Did a no-hitter, so congratulations. No, I think Mary and I are on the same page with this as far as getting input from the public. It's really, really important to us. We value their input, and I think the policy is definitely a great idea. As you mentioned, to have consistency, not just for this board, but in the future as well. So well done.
Thank you.
Well done. I'd be happy to make a motion
Great.
to adopt the public comment policy as presented.
Second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
That's a unanimous vote in favor. Keep wanting to say roll call.
I know.
The old habit. Thank you very much, Connor, for your work on this. I think this is a great improvement to our public comment in town. And so we are glad for that. So thank you. All right, next we are having a discussion on annual town meeting articles. I think Connor and Molly are going to be leading us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Tish.
It has a little delay.
So this is just a reference point where we are 14 budget articles, 6 select board articles are which we're going to speak about today, with 3 remaining miscellaneous articles, 9 planning board articles, 1 citizen petition article, for a total of 33 articles at this year's town meeting. So Stephanie had mentioned this, but it will require a vote, so I'm just going to reference it again. This is the creation of budget article 14, which is FY26 budget adjustments by appropriation. It's essentially the Article 2 equivalent for the school department. We will have those numbers finalized before your next meeting. And we'll present the full number for that one, but we'll be moving one miscellaneous article to create budget article 14. This is Select Board 5, feasibility and schematic design. This was introduced at your last Select Board meeting. And since then, we have worked with a number of, different stakeholders and experts to come up with what we thought an appropriate dollar amount would be. And we believe that $325,000 will be sufficient for both the feasibility and schematic design portion of this project, as well as the other related professional services, project management, engineering, and things that might not be directly covered under feasibility. This, again, is for the 3 sites identified by the FS1 steering committee, the landlocked parcel behind 736, 738, the Deerfield Elementary School, and the existing FS1 site. So this is the same article that was presented on the 25th. It just has an updated amount of $325,000, and our proposal would be to fund that using free cash. We just wanted to take a moment here to talk about really what is feasibility. So feasibility is evaluating whether a potential site can support a new fire station. So it's looking at things like site constraints, preliminary building placement, access. Access is going to be a big one with all of these ones. Traffic circulation, environmental and zoning considerations, and a high-level construction cost estimate. So the purpose of the work is to determine which sites are viable before investing a lot more money into detailed design. Schematic design is the first conceptual design of the building on a viable site, and includes things like initial building layout and size, how the apparatus bay could be configured, operational flow, updated cost estimates, and things like that. So that the purpose of that work is to translate the operational needs into an early visual concept of the station that residents will be able to take a look at. And why this matters so much and why we're really pushing this forward at this town meeting is to evaluate the 3 proposed sites based on facts and data that we don't have at this point. We haven't done this deep dive into these properties. Incorporate the community feedback through a public process as we get information back from the feasibility study. Then develop a realistic FS1 project cost estimate, which obviously will have shifted since the last time we were at this. And then advance a plan that is safe, appropriate, and effective for replacing FS1. It's important to also know what feasibility is not. It is not to initiate construction, and does not take the place of resident voters at a ballot for a debt exclusion. This is simply to determine what we do not know about the sites that we're considering putting a fire station on. This is a fact-finding mission. We have created, and I can say Connor has created this timeline with potential written all over it, where we're starting all over again. This is a very rough timeline, but how we're looking at this right now is we're in pre-feasibility studies. Connor mentioned during the TA update that we are hoping to sign a contract to get some wetland delineation work done and some initial work to get the ball rolling that will then inform feasibility. In the spring, between March and April, we'll be working with procurement to advertise for a competitive procurement process for both the OPM and design services for feasibility. May is town meeting. That's when we'll be seeking the funding for feasibility and schematic design, which would then kick off in the summer, including that as the feasibility study is happening, we would be having public information sessions and community forums about what that was turning out. Fall and winter, we'll, based on the feasibility, be able to come up with a recommended site and schematic design, set the project estimate for then in the fall of 26 or early 2027 to have a town meeting on the project and the debt exclusion vote. Again, this is a very early estimate. I don't want to be held to this, but this is something that if everything works out, best case scenario, this is how the project would go.
If I could just add to that, one of the things that's important here, you'll see the farther out this goes, the less precise it gets, right? That's deliberate. Because to Molly's point, depending on how the pre-feasibility phase where we're in now, right, we're going to get some preliminary site analysis done on things like wetlands, setbacks, zoning, et cetera. Depending on how conclusive or impactful that is to the ability to actually put a fire station there, that may impact where FS1 steering and the select board are with the sites for full feasibility and schematic. depending on if that work is not hitting major hurdles that are impossible to see at this point, in a very aggressive timeline, we would like, for the sake of a fire department and frankly for the sake of the community, because time is money, right? The longer it takes for this to get to a designed project that can go to bid, the exact same thing is, all other things equal, likely to cost more, right? That's something that has been heard at, I think, at nearly every FS1 steering committee meeting. We have all heard it. I've only been here, I think it's very blurry at this point, but I think 5 weeks. But we hear routinely that cost and tax impact are a huge concern. So if somebody sees this, I'm not famous for subtlety, so like the huge potential is there for a reason, but this isn't indicative that the town is attempting to rush or have something not be fully vetted. But we are trying to balance that against the reality of where the current FS1 facility is and the economic reality that delay. I try to stay away from absolutes, but public construction is not known for getting cheaper the longer you wait. And so we're really trying to balance those. So if everything breaks in our favor, in a perfect world, we'd be looking at, hopefully a fall special town meeting with a concluded feasibility and schematic program. If things are not going quickly enough to do that responsibly, then that could slide into winter or spring of next year.
Next, we're gonna go to select board 6. So Connor's gonna explain this one. Previously, this had been assigned as a street acceptance for Birch Lane. After conversations with DPW and that community, they decided not to move forward with that project at this time. So we have renamed Article 6 as the establishment of a special injury on duty reserve fund, which Connor teed up and he's gonna tell you more about.
Birch Street.
Birch Street. Thank you. Okay. There's a lot of trees down.
Thank you, Molly. So I alluded to this in Stephanie's update earlier. One of the things that can be a challenge with building an operating budget, especially for police and fire, where they have 24/7 operations, is you can't plan on the amount of injuries you have. Obviously, we'd all like that number to be zero, but the nature of the work that's not realistic. And some folks during budget season, particularly as resources get tight, might look at an Article 2 transfer and say, well, we really ought to bump up for recurring overtime spend. And as both Molly and Stephanie have acknowledged, the town is doing that incrementally, trying to do so in a responsible way. That said, trying to be responsive to the concerns of finance, the Finance and Warrant Commission, and just try to think a little bit creatively here. And full disclosure, just something I've happened to have done that worked well elsewhere, is there's a provision in state law where if a town meeting accepts that provision of state law, you can create an injured on duty reserve fund that can be used with request of the chief to a public select board meeting for disbursement to cover the direct costs associated with an injury on duty, as well as the incidentally triggered overtime. So IODs are particularly expensive because you can think of it as you're paying the straight salary of that employee who's out, as well as the time and a half salary of whoever's replacing them on overtime. So you're really spending 2.5 the rate. And so having a fund like this, you could allocate out free cash or other non-recurring costs that don't have an immediate need elsewhere. We're proposing this year an article that does two things. It would establish a fund and allocate 200,000 of available free cash into it. And this would, all other things equal, reduce pressure on the operating budget for police and fire, but also on future free cash appropriation needs in Article 2 or capital. I think it's a responsible thing to do. Town Council Pat Ahern assisted with the article. His hand is raised, so I hope I haven't just said a bunch of things that are technically incorrect that he's about to fix, but happy to answer any questions after. Again, I would ask if Pat has an item to add on this.
Yes, please.
You're muted.
So I know what you've done is a nice piece of work, Connor. No problem with that. I just want to point out that it's not unusual for a street acceptance not to go through a first time or a second time. They can take a lot of work. So it sometimes takes a couple swings to get a street acceptance to a town meeting and get it through. And Todd Corchin's been instrumental in working with that neighborhood on the issues we've got to resolve to get that street accepted. And we're committed to continue that work for the next time we get together to discuss issues at a town meeting. Perhaps it'll be ready then, or certainly by next year. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Connor. I think this is a great idea, and as you said, would really take the pressure off the operating budget with respect to injuries. You have a lot of them right now, Chief, that have been ongoing this year, and that puts a lot of pressure. Can you speak at all, Connor, as to other communities? Is this statute utilized by other municipalities in Massachusetts?
I know of at least one, and it's where I'm previously worked in Easton. We had done this. It worked very, very well from a community. I will be doing additional research just to see folks if the area are using it. I would be surprised if Easton was feeling one. We'll confirm that.
Chief, I assume that this is something you'd be in support of?
Absolutely. It's a budget killer. I've actually used, I got the grant, and part of that I'm putting towards injury prevention, fitness and stuff like that. And when I met with them, that was the #1 thing I said. I'm like, I have a ton of back injuries. Please help me.
That's great, Chief. Joe, any questions, comments?
I think it's a wonderful idea. Connor, thanks for bringing it. I think it's important the public recognizes that the police and the fire are not eligible for workers' compensation, that we, the municipality, own it.
That's right. That's a great point. Under state law, if we have somebody get hurt at work, the police or fire, cities and towns are, I don't want to say on the hook, that has negative connotation, but they are responsible for direct pay of tax-free income, indemnification on medical costs, and then of course you have incidental costs for backfilling of overtime, because whether if you're staffing, and this ties into questions around why would you staff at 11 if your minimum is at 9? Minimum at 9 on the fire department just means that's what either contractually or the chief's opinion from a safety standpoint is needed to run the shift safely. And if you have to be at 9, if you have 2, 3, 4 people in that group injured, you're filling an enormous amount of overtime. And so between the direct costs that we're obligated, that we can't cover through workers' comp, and the incidental costs, having this as a second layer is beneficial.
I like the idea.
Thank you.
So that brings us to miscellaneous articles. When we walked in the door, there were 4. We're proposing moving one of those to budget article 14, which would leave us with 3 remaining miscellaneous articles. There's nothing signed to any of those at this moment in time, but I would feel more comfortable keeping them over the next 2 weeks until your next meeting, just in case something comes up.
Thank you, Molly. Joe, any questions?
None. Well, yeah.
Sorry?
See if I can keep this straight. We flip these from miscellaneous to other article numbers.
I'll be happy to entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we use miscellaneous article 11 to create budget article 14 FY26 budget adjustment by appropriation.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote in favor.
I'd like to make a motion not to move forward with the street acceptance of Birch Street at this time, previously listed as select board number 6.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote in favor.
And lastly, vote to rename, I hope lastly, vote to rename, repurpose select board 6 for the establishment of injured on duty reserve fund.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote in favor. Thank you very much, Molly and Connor. That brings us to select board liaison reports. Anything to report, Joe?
Not from mine.
Not from me either. So we will move right to regular meeting minutes. We have two sets to approve, February 11th and February 25th. Start with February 11th. Any comments, additions, edits?
Always outstanding.
Tish, thank you very much for the very well drafted minutes as always.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes of February 11th, 2026 as submitted.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Unanimous vote in favor.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes of February 25th, 2026 as submitted.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote in favor. With that, our next meeting will be on March 23rd at 6 p.m. Also a hybrid meeting here in the main library, small conference room. I will ask, are there any questions on anything that's come up tonight? I give folks, yes, ma'am. Please come forward and state your name.
Claire Galikowski, 320 Dover Road. I was late because I thought in my mind that this was at 7. And I want to thank you. Steve told me that you accepted the regulations on the liquor license requirements to only go down to the size of a pint. So
Yes.
I wanted to thank you for that. So
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you. Appreciate that. It was a lot of work done by Nora, Pat, and many others in town. Thank you. Any comments online? Tish?
No open questions.
All right, well,
I'd be happy to.
okay, Joe's ready.
I'd be happy to make a motion to adjourn.
I second that motion out of necessity. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote in favor. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.